So welcome to the last game, episode 28. Let's see what pieces we are getting today. So we are playing against black pieces. And we will continue going with the Sicilian. Today we are playing against manuelmorphy1 at 1342. And they are from the United States. So our first United States player for a while, and we are playing open Sicilian. This will be a typical Can Sicilian. First they play a6. White develops really aggressively, which I like. We play queen c7 first. I like when white plays nice and natural moves, so we can then explore the pros and cons of each position. And as you can see, we are developing the same way. Sometimes the queen c7 does not seem to belong there, but not all the time. g3 move. Okay, so white might want to play bishop to f4 here. And for that, I will decide to play knight f6 first, because I believe that bishop f4 will run into e5 move. And white is indeed playing another natural move. But this is why I have knight on f6, so after e5, if any knight d5, I can just take on d5. And if after e5 white plays knight to b5, then we can just simply capture there and play move. Play some different move. So I don't know actually. Let me think about the e5 and what it means for us. Are we going to win the game really quickly, or are we going to make some mistake here? I suppose that we have to go for it once we have decided to develop a certain way. So as you can see, we haven't done anything, and white just became very aggressive, and now it gives us potentially a chance to win a piece for our patience, because white wanted to punish our slow development, but Can is very strong opening in its flexibility. And this time white definitely got stretched. So white plays bishop g5, which is a reasonable move. And I suppose when we say A, we also need to say B, so we will be taking on d4 first. After queen takes d4, there will be knight c6 attacking the queen. Queen d2 is a reasonable move. And as I'm still a bit worried about knight to d5, I believe that pinning that knight could be an interesting idea. But then do I want to allow double pawns here? That would give at least white some dynamic in this position. But I guess we have to go for it because I'm too scared of allowing that knight onto d5. And after all, we have a knight for a pawn, so some trades could be very good for us. So we should definitely go for some of them. At the same time, we are threatening knight takes e4. Whether that's a threat, that's could be difficult to say. But now that we have dealt with the knight d5 move, we could possibly deal with this knight on f6 before we castle. Or we can actually play some somewhat active move. Castling here looks dangerous for us. But I have an idea on how to simplify the position. One of the moves could be queen to a5. The other move is bishop takes c3. And queen to a5 looks more precise, to be honest. So we are going to go for this move. The idea is simple, to double the pawns of white on c3. And I believe there's not much white can do against this doubling of their pawns. And we are still keeping control of e5, so if we need to crupper the pawn on e5, we can always do that. And it will be very difficult for white to deal with our threat of bishop c3. White castles, which is reasonable. We are going to try and double up their pawn, which they accepting. Now we can prevent doubling our pawns with move knight to g4. So this position is a little bit strange. We have piece for 2 pawns, but we still have lots of problems to solve. Namely, again, is the castling of our king. And keeping the knight on e5 after knight g4 is gonna prove difficult as well. But something tells me do not be afraid and just castle if we get the doubled pawns. We will get the doubled pawns. The position is very complicated, to be honest. So we are going to play knight to g4. I don't see how that move can be punished straight away. So that simply is the reason why I want to play it. Potentially we can also play move like h6 and ask the bishop where it wants to go. So this is going to be our weakness for the rest of the game. But white equally has the 2 weak pawns on c3 and c2. From a5 the queen could be also transferred onto h5 in some cases. So I think asking the bishop the h6 with the h6 would be a correct procedure. We just need to be careful not to allow bishop d6, so we will never be able to castle. Queen f4, then I think h6 is a good response to that. And the bishop will have to be traded. The positive is also that we can at some point give some of the material back, maybe a pawn, and still be winning. But first we need to sort out the dangerous bishops that white has. And there's only one way to find out. It's to wait for white's move. Needless to say that the very interesting and tempting move queen d6 will never work because queen g5 is on the table. There's one really interesting move as well. That will be connected to sacrificing the queen on h3 and then knight f3. Just doesn't work with the bishop here, because the bishop will always recapture the queen with the rook e1. So the plan, what would be the plan? h6, bishop f4, queen h5, h3. Doesn't look good. What looks good more than anything else is just a castle. So we will try and castle. So at least we achieved a relatively safe position for our king. White is getting lots of pressure in the center, which is fine. So we will eventually have to let go of the pawn on d6. So I think we will play d6 straight away. One of the good looking moves for white is to play queen d5. Queen takes d6 would be a mistake, for queen takes g5. I need to adjust the mics again. Sure, this too was. And yeah, I think now that we castled, it looks like we are doing fine. We will be losing the weak pawn on d6. But as we are up a piece, that itself gives us a chance to play against white's weaknesses. So white plays the move that we wanted earlier for them to be played. That could give us a potential of trapping the bishop. Again, in the manner we wanted. And yes, I think queen f4 basically means that the bishop is trapped. There could be potential rook d5 that we need to look at. But as soon as we play h6 and white plays rook d5, we can take h takes g5. And if h6, bishop h4, g5, then after rook d5 we have g takes f4 and rook a5, knight a5. So I believe we can enter the bishop winning attack. And as we already played d6, queen g4 is not even possible as we are protecting with the bishop. So we should be able to win a piece. And with two pieces for 2 pawns, which I suppose this is what's gonna be, we should be totally winning. So queen f4 was one of the mistakes we could have potentially hoped for. And even though the position was really complicated, at some point it looked a bit shaky. Now this is absolutely no problem for us, as we can recapture back with the knight. And still have really decent position. But I prefer, before we capture with the knight on okay. I was thinking we can do queen h5 in between move, but then they can capture on g7 or go back to g5 as queen h2, king f1 just simply doesn't mean anything. So we are going to capture back, but what is the best option? I believe it's best to capture back with a pawn or with a knight. What would be the best? The knight looks a bit wonky on h6, but so does the pawn structure if I decide to take with a pawn. So hate it or love it, we will have an awkward knight on h6. And now we are going to start hunting the queen. The main reason for this is to try and trade the queen itself. Because with extra pieces we will have much better chance of winning. Rook d5, however interesting. Probably not going to provide much. Rook d6. So white has 3 pawns for 2 pieces, which is fine. We can offer peace trade. White might want to try and sacrifice on h6 one of the rooks, which looks desperate, but it could be interesting. So we are going to offer the trade with the queen here. If rook c6, then queen f4. There's no follow-up, so g takes f4, b takes c6 is okay. If queen e5, queen d2, then we can play just bishop e6, and that's the whole idea. If then f4, we have queen c5 check, and then we can offer trade of the rooks. So we go into it, queen e5. If white decides to trade the queens, then it's an endgame which should be eventually won for us after we manage to maneuver all our pieces into game somewhat reasonable. Because these pawns, white has basically 3 pawn islands, and these two islands are very weak. So we have 2 minutes 13 seconds. White obviously doesn't want to trade, and we are going to go with the plan that we had initially. So let's play bishop e6. If white plays f4, which is a good move, but at the same time you can consider it to be a desperate move. So if f4 is played, now we can just simply check the white player. And one of the problems might be that we might want to jump with the knight to g4, and it feels kind of strong. So we're definitely going to create some threats. It's not a winning threat as such or anything like that. White actually doesn't have to worry about it so much. Or maybe a little bit, because knight f2, king g1, I have knight takes e4 with a check, and then white has to play queen to e3 to which they lose the rook on d6. So some care has to be taken there. That being said, we should be simply winning. Rook c2, it protects the f2 square, which is fine. But now we can challenge white's d file. The knight here is protecting the rook one more time. And actually, because I made the move real quick, I did not notice that I can play bishop c4, which is super strong move, attacking the rook. And now it shows once you can, when you have extra material, especially pieces for pawns, once the pieces consolidate, then the pawns have no chance unless the pawns are, say, like on 6th or 7th rank. Then usually the pieces will prevail, and here it's very visible. So white is allowing us some tempos. So we have a tempo on a queen with rook d8. Queen goes down, which is fine and reasonable. So we can now attack the rook the way we want it to. There is not much white can do here. And actually white proved me wrong because they have resigned. I think one of the best moves was to play h3 to avoid all the problems in their camp, but then you just simply take. You cannot take here for rook d1, pinning the rook, pinning the queen. So you would have to take here. And it's difficult to say what to do here. But perhaps some move like knight to e3 could be good enough. Oh, we have also rook on d1, right? Also, so since we have this rook, this would be a potentially absolute killer. I really forgot that we have the rook on d8. So if queen cannot take because knight f2 check, by capturing the queen, and if bishop f1, also we have 4 pieces against 2 pieces. I don't know what am I analyzing here because this is simply over. We can do it even if I want it to be just brute force winning, then I can take, play queen f2. You cannot avoid trading the queens, and 2 knights will be too much for white. White has no way to create a pass pawn and no way to protect all the pawns with just the king. So this would be as simple as it can get. If white, say, play here, I know this is, at this point it's just a fantasy chess, but you can play here, here, I would love to have some move that will give us some winning pawn so we can check. White has to play here. Knight f2, doesn't matter where the king goes, we can take, knight e4. And it's all she wrote. This pawn, that pawn falls. Anybody can win this type of game. So we have another win with the Sicilian. And we have 2 more games to play. However, we have lost that one game on time when we were completely winning. But as you can see, these games where you play the Khan, because you spend so much time playing these slow looking moves, then once you win some material with some trickery, you need to be very careful not to get checkmated or attacked. So it's a very double-edged sword that we are playing with here. So Philidor I prefer more, as it's looks like one of those white systems that we play with either Botvinnik or Vienna. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's game. I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye now.